course not.
It would be better for everyone, especially yourself, if you just do as I ask.
Welcome back to Bandwagon fans. I'm Jeff, and I just got done watching Unsane, which is kind of like watching 3 movies at once. 2 of them were pretty good. One of them was kind of a dumpster fire. So this is a movie about a woman who may or may not have a stalker, and who definitely gets locked up in a mental institution. So without further ado, here's some highlights from the trailer.
This man, he's followed me all the way here from Boston. I'm calling the cops and I want him arrested! My stalker is here.
We did a thorough background check.
You should be protecting me. Mom, no one believes me.
I'm getting you out.
There's nothing we can do unless you have proof that a crime's been committed.
I must be insane. I must be insane.
My mom didn't pick up last night. Hello?
I must be insane.
What happened to her?
So, Unsane. Man, this movie started off so good. So this is Steven Soderbergh's first foray into horror. You know, he's a longtime Hollywood director. Logan Lucky, the Ocean's series, Ocean's 11, 12, 13, Traffic, Out of Sight, Aaron Brockovich. Just a prolific writer, director, producer. But this is his first directorial job in horror. It stars Claire Voy. And the whole movie, I was trying to figure out who she was, because she looks like she's been in a lot of movies, but I haven't seen anything she's in. She does look like Reese Witherspoon, though, and that's probably where the confusion came from. She was definitely probably the high point of the movie, though, was her performance. She was given a lot to do, and she definitely did it well. But anyway, so Claire Voy plays a woman who may or may not have a stalker. There's a little bit of the unreliable narrator going on in this movie. So she may or may not have a stalker, and while talking to a therapist, she definitely commits herself into a mental institution, but then insists that she's not actually insane, should not be in the mental institution, and then things really go haywire when she believes that her stalker is one of the caretakers in this institution. So Joshua Leonard plays the nurse / potential stalker, and Jay Farrow plays one of the other patients in the institution that she kind of befriends while she's in there. So, like I said, this was like 3 movies all in one. So, movie 1 was basically a medical anthropology class come to life, and really started grappling some pretty interesting questions about the nature of mental health and institutions, and do crazy people go to institutions, or do institutions make people crazy? And that movie was really interesting. There was a second movie about the nature of stalkers and what is love if it's only one way, and that movie also was very interesting when it focused on that. Although throughout the movie, these 2 different points of view, I didn't feel like they meshed very well. I was interested in both of them. The third movie was a very cartoonish, Hollywood, by the numbers thriller, and that was garbage. And that's really where the movie lost it. There was one point where there was a large family watching this movie, and they were all laughing hysterically because it just got to be a cartoon. So, one thing that was really interesting about the movie, though, is the way it was shot. It was almost the entire thing was filmed with a wide-angle lens. Even the close-ups were done with a wide-angle lens, and it was shot not in your standard 16:9 aspect ratio that's usually used for movies. Looking it up on IMDb, it was done in a 1 1.56 to 1 ratio. So it basically was almost a square, not quite a square, but it almost felt like a TV. And the graininess of the film, it really did harken back to like there are definitely callbacks to, oh, there's one of the cats running around tonight. I think that, yeah. So we got Ernie on the prowl tonight. Ernie's been batshit crazy all week, and you can't see this, but my head is pretty cut up because I tried consoling him when he was unconsolable last night. But anyways, so the with the aspect ratio and the wide angle lenses on close-ups, it really did help give this movie a frantic feeling throughout. Hey, speaking of frantic, all right, so and that was, and you notice that like right off the bat. So I think a lot of people will be watching this movie and they'll feel like this weird tension, but they may not understand exactly why they're feeling it that. And it's definitely because of the way it was shot. Also, some of the color was interesting. Being set in an institution, it had a real institutional colorization with like a lot of strong, like a lot of warm incandescent yellows. So that was, all of that helped the beginning of the movie set up what could have been a really compelling movie. At one point, it felt with these wide angle close-ups, it almost felt like a Jane's Addiction video, like Been Caught Stealing, because it felt like you were watching the movie in the security mirror at a Kmart. But anyways, so like Claire Voy's performance was really good as going through. And she really had to go through the ringer with conveying a lot of different emotions. Anger, confusion, despair, and whatever the script called for her to do, she rose to the challenge. She was really good. Jay Farrow also, all in all, pretty much all the performances were rock solid. Whether it was Jay Farrow, Joshua Leonard, definitely had a creep factor going on, which the character called for. But besides the kind of the disjointed narrative and that cartoonish feeling when it went for it basically could have been a really, really good Twilight Zone episode. It could have been a great movie that got you thinking about mental health and stalkers, but instead it just got cartoonish. So from the beginning of the movie to the end, if you just watch one thing, just look at the graphics at the beginning of the movie and then the graphics at the end of the movie, and there's such a stark difference. And actually, no spoiler on this part, but the final shot of the movie looked like it was a 70s or like a mid 80s direct to video horror scene. It just didn't belong with the rest of the movie. I think Steven Soderbergh was trying to do a lot of Hallmark, like a lot of callbacks to some 80s horror movies, and the movie he made wasn't a horror movie. It started off as a really good treatise about mental health and about the plight of women or the plight of anybody in a situation where they're being stalked by somebody. That movie could have been fascinating, and by the time it got to the end, it almost felt like they ran out of money. Like there was a week of shooting left, and they're like, "Oh, we're out, we're broke, we better wrap it up." So overall, as I was leaving the theater, I kind of felt like it was a 3 to 3.5 star movie. Just driving here, the more I thought about it, the end was so bad. It was so rushed. It was so cartoonish that really I can only give this maybe 2.5 stars out of 5. And this is the kind of movie, especially like if you're my age or close to it, this is the kind of movie you would have caught on, TLA Up All Night or something, This is the kind of movie you watch at 3 o'clock in the morning when you can't sleep and there's nothing else on. But with the internet and cable the way it is now, there's always something on. You could be watching this. And honestly, a lot of the reviews for this movie are probably going to be better than the movie itself. The more I talk about it, screw it. I'm gonna go 2 stars because a lot of wasted opportunities just because the end was so bad. So don't rush out to the theater to see this one. Wait for it. Catch it on cable. Catch it on late night. If you're sick, nothing else to do, it'd be an interesting watch for about an hour. But just overall kind of a little bit of a failure. The way they wrapped it up and the way they took the movie was kind of a failure. So for those of you that have not seen it yet, maybe you'll still go see it, maybe you won't. But if you do, pause the video now, go check it out, come back, and we'll watch the discussion. Otherwise, you guys can still stick around for the discussion because you're not going to be missing anything if you don't actually go see the movie. So 1 second, I'm going to do the fade out, and then I'm going to fade back in, and we'll talk some spoilers for what little there are for this movie. So for those of you that have seen Unsane, or for those of you that just don't care to see it, but you want to see some discussion about it, here we go. And there will be spoilers. So Claire Voight, she plays Sawyer, who has a stalker, and also just has some what she would describe as the normal ebb and flow of emotions and mental health. Goes in to see a therapist, and while discussing this, says that in the past she's had some suicidal thoughts, and actually had a plan. So next thing we know, she's being checked. She's actually inadvertently self-committed to a mental institution. And at this point, this is where the movie really had me. So in college, I took a medical anthropology class, and this movie was hitting on all those themes from my class of do crazy people need to be put into institutions for their own safety, or are we putting sane people into institutions and they're coming out crazy? For a little while, the movie was starting to tackle those questions, and at this point, the use of the unreliable narrator was most effective, because we didn't know for a while. Okay, she's saying she has a stalker, but does she? She's saying she's not crazy, but she appears to be crazy. But we can also see that they're doing things, the staff and other patients are doing things to make her crazy. Sorry, I got a little kitty going on down here. Come on, Ernie. Say hi. Oh, all right. So there's Ernie. So there's one scene in particular where it's I think it's her first or second night in the institution, and she gets up from her bed, and one of the male patients also gets up and basically gropes her chest, so she knees him in the groin. And this becomes a mark on her, showing how she's a threat to others, when really she was defending herself. But in that environment, she has no credibility, she has no authority, so nobody believes that, they've seen her, they think she's violent, so they interpret all her actions as being violent. So then they start medicating her, which makes her even crazier, or appear to be crazier. So that movie was fascinating, and I wanted to watch that movie, and I wanted to watch that movie play out. But then we realized that no, she really does have a stalker, and he's really in the hospital with her. So these two narratives don't quite mesh very well, because one relies on her being unreliable narrator. One tells us that no, she actually is a reliable narrator. But that movie also would have been interesting. And for anybody that's been a victim of stalking, this movie could have been panic inducing. It did a really effective job of showing the terror of not only being trapped by your stalker, but having the authorities complicit in your stalker trapping you. And that was a fascinating, that could have been a fascinating movie. All of this stuff went by the wayside, though, by the end of the movie, because it turned into just a cartoonish Hollywood good person versus bad person who's, fight to the death. And by the time it got to that point, it just completely lost interest in the outcome. I really wish they had committed to one of the other narratives and seen that narrative through to its end. But they kind of wrapped those narratives up and said, "Here we go. It's here's your cage match," because they're literally locked in a cage together. So really just kind of squandered performances. Claire Voy showed up. I've mentioned that a couple times, but she was phenomenal. And if they had stuck to the mental health, the critique of mental health, this could have been a movie rivaling One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Her performance was that good, and the premise was that strong. They kind of grabbed defeat from the jaws of victory by the end of this movie. Well, he's out of frame, but he's here. It's been a rough week for Ernie. It's been a rough week for me too, dealing with Ernie's rough week. So where was I? Let's talk about the end. So the final shot of the movie, the final scene of the movie is she's already killed her stalker, Joshua Leonard. They shenanigans ensue. They end up in the woods. She kills him. She comes out victorious. It cuts to 6 months later. She's in a restaurant with a coworker, and she sees somebody, thinks it's him again. Because now they're going back to what was in the beginning of the movie is the unreliable narrator. She thinks she sees him, but we know it's not really him. And then she takes her steak knife, and she's about to stab this totally innocent bystander. Realizes it's not really the stalker, and then runs out of the restaurant. And after she leaves the restaurant, she turns back, and the camera freezes, holds on her, slightly blurry, grainy, slightly out of focus, looking back over her shoulder. And it was reminiscent of a lot of 80s slasher movies that tried to be. Sleepaway Camp comes to mind, where it just tried to have this like little shocking tag ending. But and then it had these like really, really cheesy graphics when the credits began. And that's the movie in a nutshell. It started off as a really, really interesting psychological thriller, or even an interesting treatise on mental health, and it ended as a just schlocky waste of time B movie. So the more I talk about this movie, the less I'm interested in it. So I'm going to be wrapping this up soon. Catch this on Netflix, watch it at 3 o'clock in the morning, or just read reviews about it. If you watch reviews about it, you'll probably get as much enjoyment as actually sitting down and watching it. So there it is. So if you have seen it, go ahead and leave some comments down below what you thought of it, what you think could have been done better, or what you did like about it. And if you didn't see it but stuck through the whole video, leave a comment about what you think the movie could have been. Anyway, and as always, like and subscribe to see all of the coming reviews. We got a lot coming out, and get on the bandwagon.